Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the PetaPixel Podcast. We're going to be buzzing the great content tower here in just a few minutes. If you're listening to this, I decided, I guess I'm the only person to dress up on the episode immediately before, like the day before Halloween. Two. The lack of commitment to the visual craft is
Jordan,
staggering here.
You have a little something like right above your lip.
It's like on your, you got to wipe it.
We're going to talk about that a little bit on the what have you been up to, but I know if our viewers are anything like my children, they are terrified of what is taking place.
I have never wished for death more than right now at this point.
You know what, Jordan, what I'll do, I promise, I will also do that if Chris does it.
Well, but
we're already recording. Are we just going to take a break and go to a spirit Halloween
join
shop?
you. We'll join
Anyways. Jordan, you could be my wingman anytime.
Do you want to ask? Do you have any questions for us, Jordan? I do have one thing I want to touch on real quickly before you do.
Okay, go ahead, Jaron.
So we launched, it's been in the development phase for like 6 months, but we launched PetaPixel memberships this week, which allows you to browse PetaPixel with no ads for $3 a month or $30 a year. In addition to that, we're going to be adding more perks to it. And I kind of want it to be more like, yes, you do get to remove ads, but you also get to directly support what we do, including what Chris and Jordan do. Mm-hmm. So this really helps us out, especially in this modern digital publishing age, which is getting more and more difficult. I encourage you guys to check that out. If you do want to support us, we'd appreciate it. If you read PetaPixel at all and you don't mind the ads, don't worry about it. You can continue that experience, but this is just a way to streamline it. We are going to be adding more perks as we already have at least one planned, or two actually, that we'll be rolling out in the coming weeks. If you have things that you would like us to add to that you think we could do that won't overwhelmingly burden these two gentlemen, I'd be happy to hear what those might be. Put those in the comments below. We're looking for brainstorming more ideas of ways to add more value to this. We won't be increasing the price. We just want to put more stuff in there. So just let us know.
Yeah, if you understandably don't want our likenesses on things that you wear, I mean, we appreciate those of you who do, but if you're like, there's got to be some other way I can show these guys the love, then yes, this is an outstanding opportunity for you to do that.
Yeah, think of it like Patreon, except on a platform that we manage so that we don't have to pay Patreon fees or anything. So,
sick.
But as usual, our podcast, we're joined by Jordan Goose Drake, and we're joined by Jaron the Iceman Schneider, and I'm going to be Maverick. I'll be Chris Maverick Nichols.
That was an inevitability in terms of hair sculpting, I think. And you take the cake immediately.
Also joined by this little teddy bear Penny today, because just so you guys know, the basement's still getting work. The basement saga continues. You might hear hammering. You might hear drilling. I'm sorry about that. And so I've got Penny here with me because she likes to bark otherwise. So
that Penny is a dog for anyone just listening. So if you
Penny's
hear jingling,
a dog, yes. If you're not watching on YouTube, I mean, we appreciate it, but you're missing out on a mustache and a dog.
Yeah. Everything hairy is awesome this week. So, guys, I always like to kick things off with a question because we're going to talk to Mark Weir, formerly of Sony, someone who's been a great friend and someone we always look forward to seeing, who has recently retired. I'm in kind of a Sony state of mind. So I want to know, what was the photo camera where you were first like, oh, man, I got to start taking Sony seriously, because I know there was a big dividing line for me. So I'm curious what that was for each of you.
For me, I'd say it was pretty early on, because we were big proponents of mirrorless. A lot of our first videos, we reviewed Sony NEX, right? It was a really big player. And so I think for me, actually, the big one was still in the APS-C days with like NEX 6 and NEX 7, where I was like, oh yeah, these are cool cameras. They're compact. The lenses are smaller. So you start to really see the potential, and the image quality was the same. Obviously, they left a lot to be desired as far as EVFs and performance and handling, but you could see into the future this is going to be big.
For me, I think it was A9, the original.
Yeah.
I was doing I'm a Canon guy. I've been a Canon guy for a long time, and I was still, I think at this time, still using a 1DX for my main camera.
I love hearing this while you're wearing a Nikon museum T-shirt, but carry on.
Look, people can change. Anyway, I remember shooting with the A9 quite a bit and really, really liking it. And thinking to myself, man, this feels like that future is like here. So I was pretty pleased. I shot jets with it. I shot a baseball game with it.
Jets, that's something I'm not familiar with.
No, not at all. Yeah. I was at the Miramar Air Show. Instagram tells me 317 weeks ago. Yeah. And I shot the Blue Angels, and I was like, I was just getting some crazy good shots that I'd never gotten before. And I remember that being a huge deal for me. You, Jordan?
For me, it was... Yeah, for me, I was waiting for it because mirrorless was coming out and I was like, yeah, this could like maybe replace a DSLR and opens up some options. But it was the original A7S, which at the time we didn't know it, but this was introducing dual gain sensors. And to have something that we could adapt anything to, like big cinema lenses, and have insane low light performance. I talked about it last week. There was a short film I made with Levi Hallwell called Metanoia, which we shot primarily on like a big... I believe it was an FS7 cinema camera, but we wound up using that A7S for a huge number of the shots because it took place at night and we could just light things less. We could stop down lenses and just crank the ISO really hard. It opened up real creative possibilities. And that's exactly what I want to see with new camera technology is like, look, here's something I couldn't do before.
Wasn't it picking up like auroras, like northern lights?
Yeah, if you ever watch that film, you'll just see her like run into the distance, and
and there's like northern lights in the background.
Yeah,
in video.
Let's crank it to 12,800 shooting a movie, which it's lunacy. And the shot's soft, but we never could have captured that otherwise. So that was the moment where I was just like, the technology is really interacting with creatively what I want to do, and things are great. So I'm looking forward to that conversation with Mark going down. Bit of a memory hole. That means you forget something. We're going down memory lane. That's the place that we're going to go
jargon.
In this episode.
It's pilot jargon.
I'm sorry, the G's are really hurting my brain a little bit. So I don't know. Let's start the show, gang.
Yeah, let's start with a pilot reference. Let's put that ball to the wall and let's go. Today we're going to talk about 3 incredible lenses from OM System that are perfect for travel photography. The M.Zuiko Digital ED 12-40 F2.8 PRO, and the 12-100 F4 Pro, and the 14-150 F4.0-5.6 II. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, OM System has something for everyone and every budget. The 12-40mm f2.8 Pro is a favorite among travel photographers for several reasons. Its versatile focus range covers everything from wide-angle landscapes to tight portraits, making it perfect for capturing a variety of uses. The 12-100mm f4 Pro lens is an absolute
Chris's baby
powerhouse.
I love it.
It's a powerhouse. With its extended zoom capabilities, it covers everything from beautiful landscapes to close-up wildlife shots. This lens also features built-in image stabilization, which is a game changer when shooting handheld, ensuring all your shots are sharp and clear. The 14-150 f4.0-5.6 II is incredibly lightweight and compact, making it the first ultimate travel companion. What's great about this lens is its versatility. It's perfect for capturing everything from landscapes to portraits without the hassle of changing lenses.
But changing the game.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Whether you're looking for sharpness and low light capability of the 12-40mm, the versatility of the 12-100, or the compact convenience of the 14-150, OM System has the best travel lenses for every adventure. For more information and to learn more about local promotions, visit your local authorized retailer or explore.omsystem.com/PetaPixel today. Thanks to OM System for sponsoring the PetaPixel Podcast. The first thing on it was a surprisingly busy week. Maybe it's because we recorded the last podcast so early, so it's really like a week and a half.
Yeah, this is a week and a half of news here.
I hope you all enjoyed us crammed into that tatami room. By the way, speaking of that, when I went back and I edited that, I was like, I have basically no memory of this podcast. I was still delirious from travel. And I remember looking over at Chris like while I was editing it, and Chris is like slumped in a corner of that room.
Yes, I had glazed eyes, much like G-Lock. How many G's can you pull, Jordan, before you pass out and start to lose vision?
I can handle a solid 8 G's. I just hope I don't bounce against the cockpit, in case of an emergency ejection, because that I have no tolerance for whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
Legitimate, actual question: have you actually sustained G's of any kind that you're aware of?
No, I mean, like I was learning to fly a Cessna with my uncle when I was quite young, but that's just like taking off and landing very slowly. I've never actually been in like a jet like you have, Jaron. So I can't say. I'm sure I have a very low stamina for it because flying that Cessna, my tummy got a little bit troubled from time to time.
Okay, Chris, have you ever?
But now he's a Top Gun. Now he's a Top Gun pilot.
Okay, my commitment to the costume is maybe not as high as it has been for some other people.
Okay, I
Chris, have you sustained G's?
I have not sustained G's. No, I have not. Turbulence in a commercial plane. I was in a hot air balloon once. That was really nice.
That was really nice. Yeah.
Lots of small helicopters and small planes. I too, I like to ride the vomit roller coaster nowadays as I've gotten older. What you doing, Pan?
Yeah, she's hitting the microphone's what she's doing.
This is good content.
I can tell you that sustaining G's is not fun. And do
you know what I would do, Jaron? If I was going to have the pilot experience, but I didn't want to vomit, or maybe it would still make me, I would try out something like the Apple Vision Pro. I think that would be pretty cool. I don't know. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, but it doesn't give you G's. What?
It's immersive. You can trick your brain into feeling physical pressure on your body.
It's a segue.
Are you trying to segue
into our first story?
Yeah. So
we can get back on topic.
I don't want to get back on topic. All right. So the first story that I wanted to bring up is that if you are listening to the podcast at any point in audio, you may have noticed that a episode dropped at the end of last week. Surprisingly and without notice, it was a bonus episode. It's half an hour long, and I sat down with two people from Apple to talk about what they, at Apple as a company, think the future of photography is, and why they're so invested company-wide in the Vision Pro. So if you'd like to listen to that, and also I've gotten it in a written article form. If you don't want to listen, you just want to read, there's a link in the description below, and then you can go find that podcast on any of your favorite podcasting apps, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Oh, it's not on YouTube or YouTube Music, but it's on all the other
totally ones. New music that'll break your brain.
Very good podcast.
Thank you.
You did a really nice interview. And I guess my question is, I know the Apple, listening to the two Apple execs, they're really big on sort of Vision Pro being a creative method of consuming content in the future. And photography, do you think like it's a future of photography?
I think
still images.
If you can get the vision technology into more people's hands, I do think there is something unique and special about what they've done with spatial photos.
Right.
It was an actual, like, it made me feel something. I can't say that about a lot of technology. And I'll be honest, a lot of what the Vision Pro does, there's just not a lot of use cases for it yet. But looking at pictures that are spatial in the Vision Pro, and then also doing panoramas, those aren't spatial, but just like putting a panorama up in the Vision Pro where it actually corrects the lines so that you can look around and it looks like you're there. That is sick. The new technology that they have, which turns any picture spatial, is also surprisingly excellent. It makes you feel like you're sitting there again. Like it literally feels real. It's super weird. I think it's very neat. I don't want to say that I have necessarily an opinion on if it's the future of photography. They feel like it is. So I kind of lean on just letting them talk about that. But I will say that there is something there.
Yeah. Do you think like people are going to take pictures at like a birthday party of their kids blowing out birthday candles and stuff in
spatial?
spatial,
On your phone, right?
You can already do
Well,
it
of course,
with no downsides. Like you can do it with all of the other normal photo capture stuff and you wouldn't notice it. Just having spatial on is like they
totally.
They lean on this as like just do it so you don't regret it later. I mean, their tech is very good at turning a non-spatial photo spatial anyway if you do not remember to do it or choose not to. But
no, I have to get one on my head to really understand it. I think that is a real key point. And I could see taking like an art photo, whatever it would be, like a professional portrait or a landscape or something like that, and then, consuming it with the Vision Pro in that regard. Do I see like saying, oh, hey, pass this around to all the family members at the table, say, look at the birthday party we had, look how cool this is? I don't know if I would do that. Who knows? I don't know if I would do that.
I think it's sort of, yes, you can share the Vision Pro, like there's a share mode. But
it's
like
not
I
ideal
mentioned,
though.
When I mentioned in the beginning, is like it really only will matter once more people have the ability to do this on their own. And maybe
will the entire world just walk around with Vision Pros on their heads?
Because by the way, that's never going to happen. The idea when we saw like the Vision Pro launch and people were like walking around streets with it, those guys are stupid. It was never designed for that. It's not supposed to be used like that. It's dumb.
Unless you're a fighter pilot, they can wear helmets.
Okay, sure. Okay, are we going to keep going back to Jordan wearing a Top Gun outfit?
Yes. Oh, I mean, he brought this on himself. Yes, absolutely.
I'm willing to bear it.
So, guys, starting this week, Google Photos, the app, will start showing when a photo has been edited with Google AI. It's not C2PA. It's not CAI stuff, the Content Authenticity Initiative. But the metadata will now be put more visibly in front on Google Photos. It's a little weird it took so long to get to this point, but here we are. Finally, they're finally supporting. Oh, by the way, that photo of that campfire on the beach is not real, basically.
Right. But this is still, make no mistake, in the metadata, right? It's not going to be like a watermark. It's not going to be a visual indicator.
Correct.
Do you think we need to, would that be more helpful? I know, yes, you can easily erase them and all that kind of stuff, but would it be helpful to have a visual watermark so you can quickly identify that? Like, are people really going to always go into the metadata? Or is the onus on the person to actually want to research, is this fake or not?
Are you asking our opinions on this?
Yes. And the viewers, everybody's.
I feel like the two solutions we've got are both sort of incomplete. Like the watermark is not going to fix it, obviously. The Samsung thing is funny because if you remember, you could use Samsung's AI to remove the watermark of Samsung's AI, which is hilarious. I think metadata is a good way to go. I mean, that's what CAI is already doing. It is metadata. I think that actually seeing the full idea of how the Content and Authenticity Initiative is supposed to work with like the full provenance of an image visible across platforms, that's really the only way it's going to be complete right now. This all just feels like pretty piecemeal.
Jordan? Yeah, it feels very much like they're just slapping a Band-Aid on after, especially I know like The Verge went after them pretty hard with the launch of the Pixel.
And rightfully so.
For like, look, I can make it look like there's a car on fire in this with basically no consequences very easily.
I can put drugs on the floor of this shot. Yeah, make it look like
that was, one of the big ones as well. Yeah, very easy to do. So it feels like kind of a Band-Aid solution as opposed to, the CAI, which is a little bit more well thought out. But again, we just need major publications, major websites to start embracing that so people get used to seeing that watermark and understanding how it works, that they can click and see the processes of an image.
Right.
Yeah. Jordan, I'm really sorry about this. I know that you were
this bummed me out, man.
Yeah. Tamron, a Tamron executive has basically said they're not going to revisit fast primes, the 90 millimeter F2.8 macro that you guys are using right now testing. That was kind of an outlier. The quote is, "We are focused on our strengths with zooms."
Sad.
Makes perfect sense.
Sure, but maybe it's from a selfish standpoint as a consumer, but it's disappointing. And I liked they make some really nice primes. I mean, it's some beautiful 1.8 primes, and I think there's still a market for compact primes. I don't feel like the original manufacturers make that many good compact little primes. There could be more. So it seems strange to me. But
yeah, I know they're feeling the heat from a lot of the Chinese manufacturers who are now making autofocus primes and are certainly developing less zooms right now. But they did, like we were talking recently about like 85s and fast 50s and how none of them tend to have good macro capabilities anymore. And that was an area where the Tamrons excelled, and there's still a gap there. So I don't know, maybe we need to do an episode looking back at some of Tamron's most beautiful primes, because I know the 45-1.8, the 85-1.8, the 35-1.4 that won our lens of the year in the DSLR mount. You know, they have
even
a real
I allowed
legacy
that.
Yeah, that was crazy. You were just like, I can't even shoot this focal length, but this thing is undeniable, damn it.
It was a great lens.
Yeah, they have set the quote here is at Tamron, the strategy is to differentiate. We offer zooms that do not exist elsewhere. That is our core business. These lenses are sharpened in a homogeneous way at all focal lengths and have very good autofocus. It would obviously be interesting to announce lenses like a 24-1.4, 35-1.4, or even an 85-1.2. These are lenses that make you dream. But today, from a commercial point of view, there are already a large number of players who offer this type of optics, and we are rather trying to play the agility card. So we are focused on our strengths with our zooms.
Mm-hmm.
I get it from a business perspective. Yeah. But I don't have to like it.
Creatively. Yeah.
Lomography.
Speaking of lenses.
Yeah. How about more glass? Yeah. Well, Lomography's new Lomo'Instant wide glass is, quote, the best instant camera on Earth, according to Lomography. I can't verify that. Perhaps you guys can when you evaluate it in the coming weeks.
We're going to give it a try. I mean, this makes sense because Fujifilm, we're talking Instax wide format, they're larger instant format. There is nice potential because of the larger size of the print that you get. And one of the downsides with Fujifilm's Instax cameras is those plastic lenses. They tend to be the same, especially with the latest camera. We didn't see any improvement there. The aesthetic is soft and kind of blurry, and I think there's room for a little bit of improvement. And this isn't the first glass lens. I mean, Lomo's done this before, other companies have done this before, and it does help. It does give you sharp results. What I'm most excited for is not only do we have a glass lens, but also one with a 52mm filter thread mount. That opens up a lot of fun stuff. They've got cool like lens splitters and multiple exposure splitters, and they've got the obvious ability just to put 52mm filters on is really cool. So I'm excited about that.
Y'all can look forward, and by y'all I mean like anyone listening, look forward to their review of that, which is on the board for the coming weeks. So we'll see how it actually performs. I'm curious. I'm sure you're going to compare it to the other wide that you recently looked at. Yeah. So that'll be cool.
Already we can tell you, if you watch or listen to our show, the Lomo is a product that is more designed for you.
Yeah, for creative photographers that want to kind of experiment and have some manual exposure and stuff. Yeah.
This past week marked the 70th anniversary of the Leica M, and Leica is celebrating in a very Leica way with a limited
something
edition.
For everyone, right, Jaron?
No, the opposite.
Bring an M to the people?
Nope.
This is something for a select 250 people in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, damn it.
Only 250 of these will be produced. It's called the Leica M Edition 70, and it costs $23,000.
Yeah.
You buy one, Jordan?
Gorgeous.
This is not an anniversary party I will be partaking in, Jaron.
That's a shame.
Gorgeous camera. This is an analog camera. It's a mechanical camera, largely like an M3, but with some MA kind of design cues. So it's gorgeous. It's analog. It's beautiful. Platinum plated. I mean, I like the sort of understated aesthetic of the coloring. I mean, no doubt. It's a gorgeous, classy camera, which makes a lot of sense. Leica is famous for making these limited editions, and frankly, they do really well with them. So why not keep going, right? But yes, it's very exclusive. It's ridiculously expensive, but it's an interesting piece of history considering how long they've been in the biz. Oh, you bumped your head.
Your dog keeps hitting your mic. It's cute. All right, Jordan, I think this one's one that you have some opinions on.
Yeah.
We had some anecdotal evidence that sort of backed this up, but now there's some real evidence that points to it. DJI is selling a whole hell of a lot of Osmo Pocket 3s. So many, in fact, that it owns 24.3% of the Japanese video camera market. That's insane. We have one camera.
I don't doubt that. in even the slightest, because we were just in Tokyo, but this news hadn't come out. This wasn't a story that was being worked on at PetaPixel, but everywhere I looked, I'm like, damn, man, did we completely miss the ball not reviewing the Pocket 3? Because these things are everywhere. Like every tourist just pointing them out of windows of cars. You couldn't avoid the Pocket 3s. They were just ubiquitous over there. And then all of a sudden we get these findings that, yeah, they're owning the action camera market. I mean, certainly like GoPro is still a player in there, Insta360, but DJI has just taken off in such a huge way. And I don't think this is coming from like everyone buying a bunch of Ronin 4Ds in the last little while. This market share is coming from pocket cameras taking off.
Jordan, in your professional opinion, what has better gyroscopic stabilization and guidance, the Osmo Pocket 3 or the American AMRAAM radar-guided medium-range missile?
Well, the AMRAAM does definitely have longer range. I would say that the Pocket is very limited by its standard wide angle, but quite corrected perspective.
Right.
So I think, the Pocket makes more sense for more people. But if you're looking for the best of the best, then clearly America's military excellence can't be over-complimented.
Very nice. When you need to splash bogeys at distance.
I mean, the presence of a bogey is really key in terms of what is the correct choice.
I resent that earlier you're like, let's get us back on topic, only to now derail us again. Chris?
100%. It's a legitimate question.
It is not.
Man.
Respectively, by the way, before we move on to the next topic, I mentioned that it's 24.3% of the sales in Japan. The next highest percentage goes to the GoPro Hero 12 Black, and it's at 9%. So, like, it's a dominant selection.
We're talking Canon in the early 2000s level dominance here.
It's insane how popular it is. And every event we go to, like I see it when we went to Apple Park this year, I saw it multiple times. As you mentioned, walking in Tokyo, see it constantly. So yeah, they must have sold so many of these things. And so it's not just Japan. We've seen it elsewhere.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing, H&Y announced the new RevoRing Mark II, which combines a CPL and a VND. Jordan had one handed to him in Japan by me because I got one, and I wanted him to tell me what he thought of it. So this is your time, Jordan, to say what you like, don't like, and whatnot about the H&Y RevoRing Mark II.
Yeah, I think these are they do tend to be geared at people shooting video, a lot of the variable NDs, because typically when you're using filters for photography, things like portrait with strobes and landscape, it's a little bit more deliberate, where the appeal of a variable ND is you can very quickly shift your exposure, drop the light down, usually to maintain a slow shutter speed, so you get nice natural looking motion with it. And I've used the previous RevoRing. We actually had a review up for that. But that wasn't a blend of a polarizer and a variable ND. The big issue that you'll run into is a variable ND. It is dual polarizers. So a lot of the time you'll get the exposure that you want, but you're also not getting, say, the saturation in the sky that you want. The reflections are getting skewed. So now you have the polarizer element as well to offset that. So in principle, it's really good. The issue that I found, and I'm sure this is what H&Y came up with, is it's very easy to accidentally shift the wrong ring when you have an adapter ring that you can open and close to click it on different focal lengths. You've got a variable ND exposure ring that you need to control, and you've got a polarizer ring that you can control. So their solution is little pins so you can lock all of those. And it works very well for maintaining, which is why I think this will be great for photographers. If you are a photographer who likes to use variable ND filters, this makes a ton of sense for you in those situations.
Right.
As shooting video on the streets where we're moving in and out of shade very quickly, and I was really trying to capture more of like a run and gun feel in this. I mean, you can certainly see it by the time this comes out in the Nikon video where we did a tour of the factory. We're just constantly moving in and out of different exposure, and I'm just reefing on that ring to quickly catch up. And there I found, oh no, I accidentally locked the ring, or I should have locked the ring, and now I've accidentally bumped it, shifted exposure. I just found it a little bit fiddly for run and gun work. So if you're doing some more deliberate, controlled time lapses, this would be fantastic for. But for a run and gun variable ND rig, it wasn't my first choice, unfortunately.
I would like to try it for, by the river kind of video. Obviously, polarizer is very handy when you're shooting around water, but it's amazing how well that RevoRing grip holds. I mean, you look at it and you're like, there's no way this is going to hold. This is going to be, it's going to fall off.
Didn't fall off once,
but it's actually quite secure, but it's very large. You could easily catch it on stuff. And I will also say, as a presenter, I couldn't see the tally lamp, which was really annoying. So, because it does have that kind of large profile on the front of the camera. So yeah. It's interesting, but not perfect.
So I'll link to it in the description below if you want to take a look at it. But that's the thoughts from the team there. I should have let you hold on to it, Chris, just so you could. I have it here. Jordan gave it back to me at the end of the day.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. It's our water's gonna be frozen here pretty soon anyway. So don't worry about it.
Okay, so let's move on to the main story this week, where we're talking with Mark Weir, a retired Sony executive, on his thoughts on the cameras and how cameras and photographers have changed over the last 20 years. But before we get to that, we have a main story sponsor from one of Jordan's favorite products. I'm going to let him take it away.
So the main story sponsor of this episode is Clean My Mac. Now, this is software that I've been using previously in Clean My Mac's X, a previous version of it, and I just find it incredibly useful because I'm bad for moving files, and I'm like, I'll just quickly slap it on my internal drive, and don't worry, I'll remember to delete that later, and I almost never do. So I wind up with just a hideous desktop and a downloads folder that's 6 years long, completely disorganized. So I rely on Clean My Mac to just give me a little tap on the shoulder and be like, look, man, this thing is a mess. And fortunately, we have software here that can help your disorganized self. So I've been using this for quite a while, and recently they have updated it to a brand new version with a much cleaner, more intuitive interface. It's actually a real pleasure to quickly work through. It doesn't feel like you're doing homework. You can just at a glance see what you might want to catch up on. It's going to do things like control malware on your computer as well. And I just find it a very straightforward, affordable, easy to use tool that I've been using for a while. And the new version is a big step forward. So fortunately, you can try it out. You can see just how disgusting the internals of your beautiful Mac might actually be by downloading a free trial of Clean My Mac. So definitely check the link in the description below or in the episode description if you're just listening to the audio version of this. But I love this software, so I was thrilled when they reached out hey, do you guys Clean My Mac is interested in sponsoring? And it's absolutely, because this is something I used well before they reached out to us here at the show. So definitely check it out. All right, so now we're going to jump on an interview I think all of us have been waiting to do for 6 months or so, basically, when our good friend Mark Weir, former executive at Sony, retired. And we've been dealing with Mark since our very first press trip was the A7S II launch. And I remember we were seated with Mark, and my initial thing is oh man, we worked at a camera store. It's man, a dinner with people who work for camera companies. This could be rough. And we had a great time. And we have always really looked forward to seeing Mark any opportunity we have. And now that he's retired, it's are we going to get super candid, Mark? Let's pick his brain a little bit. And this is a huge opportunity because you've been in this industry for a very long time. So I'm looking forward to it. We've got some questions, and I know you've got some strong opinions about the way things were and the way that they're going. So thank you so much for joining us on the show, Mark.
Well, thanks for your invitation.
Before you get into your questions, Jordan, one thing I want to say is that was not my first in-person meeting with Mark. I believe my first in-person meeting with Mark was here in Portland for the A7R3? 2?
Oh.
Which one was it,
It'd be
Mark?
R2, because that was before us, yeah.
Yeah. we went and we were at the school. We went to like the roof of a school here in Portland that was like no longer in use. And then we had like dinner up there. And then we went back to the bus and someone showed up with Jello shots. That's what's seared into my mind. So,
Yes.
That was
what a great business we work in.
Mark has showered us with very nice craft beers as well over the years. It's been fantastic.
So it's very good to see you again, Mark. We've missed you.
Great
Yeah,
to see you guys
absolutely.
as well.
All right, so let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, like just going back to kind of a historical thing, you have been with Sony as they basically moved from, primarily like the CyberShot series cameras up to being one of the big professional brands that a lot of people use. So what was that shift like? And I know there were various steps in it where Sony made big jumps. What was that experience like for you, Mark?
It was the realization of a long aspiration. I think that all camera manufacturers relish the benefit and the pride in creating products that professionals use, as well as enthusiasts, and because professional users bring to the challenge of making excellent products the reliance that they have on such products. So it was the realization of a long dream. I had been with Sony for 38 years when I retired, and in the imaging business for about 25 years.
So you've been with Sony a whole Jaren.
Yes, a whole year.
Oh man!
But in 25 years in the imaging side of Sony, it was always an aspiration to create the products that professionals and enthusiasts really loved and chose for their work. Because one of the great parts of imaging is it's a creative pursuit, and there's a very high satisfaction that comes from creating products that people who are artists essentially use.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we talked about before we brought you on, Mark, was that a strong memory for all three of us was that basically every major Sony event, there would be an executive or an engineer or group of engineers from Japan who would show up, and then they would talk to all of us at length. And they asked us specific questions about specific features. They asked us if anything bothered us about anything in a Sony camera. And of course, there's always going to be something. And for the longest time, for example, it was menus. All three of us would complain about the menu system in Sony cameras forever. So with that in mind, how much of what like North American media was saying to these technical people was actually being used by Sony Japan? Like, how often would they hear us and go back to Japan and be like, this is what they said, this is what needs to change? Or were they just, curious and they were going to continue doing what they were doing regardless of what we said?
Well, it's kind of a two-part answer. The essence of product planning, which I think in which all manufacturers are engaged, is to listen to the end users. And much has been written about Sony's dedication to listening to its end users and incorporating it into future development. And I believe that that's true for most any successful manufacturer. It's pretty easy to see. The challenge for any product planner is the lead time and the difference in expectation of implementation. Most end users will speak about the way they use a product and their desires for how that product works in a much, much shorter term than a manufacturer can realize. They're thinking about how they're using a product today, or how their camera performed for them last week, and their wishes and what they'd like to see is generally in a lead time of measured perhaps in months. Your next product, we'd like to see this. And the challenge is the alignment between the actual lead time for development and the presumed lead time for development. Because in many cases, I can't speak for all manufacturers, but certainly the products that they're planning are the lead time to their realization as measured in years, not months. Bringing a product to market with a new idea or some change in the course of a year is a challenge for any manufacturer, and that difference in lead time is often the measure of in many end users' minds of how well they're being listened to.
I think a really clear example of that is the pandemic, where suddenly like USB streaming became incredibly important, and everybody's like, "Why is my camera doing easy USB streaming now? I have no life." And it was like mid 2022, early 2013, where we started to see like pretty seamless functionality roll out. So it's a very clear example where it's like this is a priority, but those development cycles are so much longer than a lot of people might assume.
Yeah,
that's an excellent example. I mean, if you consider the companies that were making HDMI converter devices to support streaming were able to react very quickly to deliver those products, and they became very, very popular almost overnight.
I bought one.
But at the same time, camera manufacturers as a whole took a couple of years before they could incorporate that capability into their models. Part of it was due to the model life cycle, but part of it was due to the fact that streaming capability needed to be worked into the overall user experience of a much more complicated product.
So jumping outside of Sony for a little bit, because you have seen so many developments, and just as part of your role, you're looking at what other manufacturers are doing. Like, how have you seen camera design shift over your entire career?
Great question. Huge question. Many years.
2 minutes. Clock's going.
Probably the most prominent example of the entire shift in the industry is the change from cameras being mechanical devices to cameras being electronic devices. And I think that most everyone has noticed that over time, but over a long time frame, the impact of that becomes more and more clear. Specifically, if those of us who were around in the industry to watch the shift from film to digital can really see that, because in the old days, as I like to call them, camera manufacturers were pretty much involved in the mechanical aspects, the mechanical and the optical aspects of the camera. The image quality aspects of the camera ended up being largely in the role of the manufacturer of the film. Mm-hmm. That all changed, as we all know, to digital, where the key devices in the camera really determine what the camera can offer the photographer in terms of functionality and capability.
Right.
Things like speed and image quality and connectivity and the ability to capture the moment. All of this was really now focused in the camera design, and it was largely gated by the semiconductors that were in the camera. And that was, in my mind, that was probably the most substantial shift that I observed in my years. And the great, I wouldn't call it irony, but the great, one of the most interesting parts of that further development has been the return to the popularity of film and film cameras.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a cycle where, but there are other cycles of that sort in the imaging industry. I mean, just take a look at the rise of the use of the smartphone as the camera. And then, ironically enough, the shift for certainly some users from the smartphone back to the camera.
Yeah. So, to follow up that question, Mark, I know in our industry, mirrorless cameras were one of the biggest shifts, right? I mean, especially from the DSLR and the SLR, which were the stalwarts of the professional community. We were big proponents of that early on. You know that. I mean, we talked about a lot on our show, and we're like, "Oh, mirrorless is great."
Video.
We're like, "Yeah." Our first video was an NEX product, and
GF1 actually, but yeah.
Well, okay. The first field test we did, like
That's
that
true.
actually was
NEX
like
3.
Yes, was actually like one of our videos was an NEX.
Let's not argue.
And so, yeah, Jordan, shut up. And so
I got the timeline pulled up right now, Chris. Damn it!
Oh, geez, you're so pedantic. Okay, so what I'm wondering about is Sony seemed to be a company that jumped on that bandwagon pretty quick, and you guys had a DSLR business, but certainly the big players were Nikon and Canon. So when did Sony kind of make that decision? And do you remember like what that decision-making process was like to really start to commit to mirrorless cameras, not just as like a consumer or prosumer thing, but actually a professional product?
Well, I can comment not on the engineering side, not on the development side, but more on how it affected the end user. And I think in the early days of mirrorless, 2008 to 2010, it became clear to many that the shift from mechanically operated cameras to electronically operated cameras, or mechanisms to, say, solid state, for instance, was going to happen. And you'd have to really go back into the archives to see how different manufacturers behaved. But I think it became clear pretty quickly that there was not only a change coming, but a difference in the way images would be captured. And let's face it, it was affecting photography and still cameras. It was something that had already been developed in the world of video. And if it could be developed in video, it was a question of, well, how quickly can it be adapted to still photography, and how will that happen? And from this long term, it was really a question of, okay, the devices to make this possible, to make a still camera that operated in the way a video camera was, and how could that be adapted to the standards and the performance level of the way still cameras were. And there were signposts along the way. If you think about it, mirrorless cameras were readily available in the context of fixed lens cameras, right? They were mirrorless all along.
Yeah, sure.
And it was really to see the future in those days was more it became essential to really focus on how a camera operated, what it was doing when it was taking a picture. And from that perspective, it was pretty clear that this was going to happen as soon as the devices became available that made it possible. And once those devices became available, it was just really more a question of when is it going to get done more than anything else, not if.
Well, and you guys, I remember very distinctly, had the R1, which was a fixed lens APS-C camera. And we looked at that like a few years ago. We did a retrospective on it. And we were really surprised how much it felt like a mirrorless camera. You could see kind of the steps to making that more usable already taking place at that point where the sensors, weren't up to snuff for like professional use.
Yeah, if you think about where were the turning points, even though most wouldn't see it in those terms, one of the big turning points was the shift from CCD image sensors, large CCD image sensors, to large CMOS sensors. Yeah. Because large CMOS sensors, once they were developed, had the speed, had the low energy consumption, and in their early days, perhaps not so much, but soon it developed the necessary image quality with which mirrorless cameras could be realized on a major scale. So it was really a shift in the image sensor capability. And if we were to trace the development of mirrorless beyond its initial stages into the stages that it's in today, it's really the further and further development of those image sensors in terms of their readout speed, their image quality, their dynamic range, their lower and lower power consumption. And after that, kind of the genie was out of the bottle, and where we are today is largely based on the development of those sensors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea of having blackout-free preview from the same image sensor that was capturing the frame, the ability to shoot at 30 frames per second or 120 frames per second with excellent image quality. I mean, once those capabilities were realized in the devices, camera development followed suit.
Mm-hmm.
I have a...
Do you... go for it, Jen.
No. You go for it, Chris.
Well, I was just going to ask on that same topic, I remember, of course, the A6000 being huge and, reviewing the first full frame Sony mirrorless. But on that same sort of topic about products, was there something that surprised you, something that was like a real hit that you didn't necessarily think would be, or something that really flopped and you were surprised that it did?
In some cases, yes. Not in all. Probably the aha moments in my experience, a lot of them were actually in the very early stages of digital camera development back in the late 90s. Much has been written about those days. But the development of the Mavica, for instance, and the focus on how end users were actually using digital cameras and the challenges that they faced, and innovative ways to really meet the demands that were required to really drive the shift from film to digital. And this, I think, is true for several manufacturers. I mean, manufacturers in the late 90s were grappling with how to realize digital cameras with the devices that were available at the time. And you see a whole variety of different kinds of cameras being made in those days. But Mavica was something that was very, very different from what other manufacturers were doing. And it really highlighted the notion that if the focus is on the way the user actually operates the camera and overcoming the pain points and the difficulties that they have, that's where adoption really takes place. And I think that's a good example of what surprised not only me, but also the entire industry as a whole. I think Mavica took the industry by surprise. Other than that, I think that as a long-term observer of how the trends developed, it was the rapid acceleration of the acceptance of mirrorless that took place, I'd say, from 2016 onward, and really started to shift into high gear in 2018 and 2019, when mirrorless cameras really came of age and were able to provide performance that mechanical camera or that mechanically based cameras simply could not contend with. And we started to see that from a variety of manufacturers once everybody got on board, and development from different manufacturers took slightly different directions, but the shift really accelerated, I think, in those days. And it wasn't just in terms of the cameras, it was also in terms of the lenses. There was what few had really recognized early on was that lens design had to keep up with camera design. Because as cameras accelerated in their performance, the ways of making lenses, not only from an optical standpoint, but from a mechanical standpoint, had to go hand in hand if the camera's capability was to be realized. And I think that was a surprise for many people. And let's face it, there are pretty much every major manufacturer of not just cameras, but also lenses has realized that a new kind of lens needed to be created to take advantage of the performance of mirrorless cameras. And we've seen a shift in the industry of lens design and lens manufacture that probably hasn't happened since the shift from manual focus to autofocus lenses has taken place, with the shift from lenses designed for SLRs and lenses designed for mirrorless cameras. And it's affected pretty much all of the players in the lens business.
On that topic, Mark, like you were there when they brought out the E-mount, and then later we're like, this is going to be an open mount. We're really going to encourage third-party developing. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, yes and no. The announcement itself, I was there in the room at Photokina 2010 when the announcement was made, and it was different. Let's face it, the support from third-party lens manufacturers for individual camera manufacturers' mounts is something that goes back for decades and decades. So it wasn't that unusual, but the idea that lens manufacturers would be encouraged to take the step into making lenses for mirrorless cameras, I thought was a great idea.
Yeah, it's not like it was not an unusual thing to see a third-party lens, obviously, but there has been manufacturers who have been quick to remind me that it was never officially sanctioned in many cases, that it just happened. So like that's their excuse, for example, for keeping a mount closed. I'm sure that you can infer whom I'm speaking of, and I'll leave it there. But the fact that Sony was like, no, we're taking a different stance was, I would say, pretty radical, and still
it was promoted as a feature.
Yeah, like today, that's still relatively radical. Looking at this, and it's been 14 years.
I look at it more in the context of recognizing that lenses needed to be different, that needed to be designed differently to take advantage of the coming change in the cameras. And I thought I thought it was a great idea. But again, that's one of the changes in the lens business, but there are other changes as well. Look at the advances that have taken place in optics. When Sony announced G Master in 2016, I think that most photographers, particularly photographers that demanded a lot from their lenses, recognized that there were lenses that could be sharp, and then there were lenses that offered beautiful artistic rendering, and there still are. But it was really quite novel to say that, hey, why can't we do both in the same lens? And I think that the further development in lenses and the number of manufacturers that are not only really pushing the limits of lens design, and the number of manufacturers who are now making lenses is a reflection of the dynamism that exists in that part of the business.
Was there ever a third-party lens where you were just like, hot damn, they really came up with something clever there. Do we need to ape that? Or like, I wish we'd pitched this idea first. Anything like that?
There are a lot of very talented designers in this industry. Let's face it. It reflects the creative demands of the end users. That's one of the greatest parts about the imaging industry is the end user community and their requirements, because they are, they're artists and their needs are changing all the time, and that serves as an inspiration for designers of all of the different companies that are involved in the industry. It's dynamic. It serves it's not a passive use of imaging products. It's creators that are using these products.
Right.
And that provides the constant demand for development.
That brings up a question mark, because like you were in a very unique position, not just to have a say in product planning and what products should be designed, but really having that connection with other manufacturers and what they're doing, what's going on in the industry, but also as you talk about the end user. So I guess my question is like, how has the camera user changed? You know, your observations about who's buying these products, what their needs are, how has that changed over these decades that you've been with Sony?
Well, I think that two words that were coined many years ago, more than 20 years ago, that I think really reflect this is the idea of visual communication. Visual communication and the adoption or the growing adoption of visual communication from people has expanded so much because of a variety of factors. I mean, there's the internet, there's people's desire to communicate with each other, there's the advances in imaging technology. There are so many factors that are affecting how humans interact with each other visually, and the ability to create visual communication is, well, it's never going to end. But one thing's for sure, the number of people who are imaging active, shall we say, is it becomes a larger and larger part of the population. And if everyone on Earth, or if a substantial portion of everyone on Earth is communicating visually, it gives rise to interest in the tools with which that's done. And I think that has fueled many different things in the camera business, but even more, it's fueled the growth of the smartphone business. It's fueled the growth of vlogging and monetization of content creation for so many different purposes. And it's that constant dynamic in what users demand and users' involvement in content creation that has an impact on the imaging industry. But it's striking just how many people on Earth communicate visually and take advantage of and enjoy creating content to keep in touch with their friends and to spread the word, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good transition to this question. Is like, I kind of want to know, from you've been doing that, you were in the industry for so long, how has like the camera user changed from when you like first got into cameras? Can you describe what that person looked like, and then how they are when you retired, what that person looked like? Like, how did the camera
5'11" to 6'1"?
Like, what is looking
taller?
from Sony's perspective? What did their end user look like, and how did that change over the course of 20-something years?
Well, I don't think in terms of Sony's perspective, I can't speak for Sony.
Sure.
But,
in Mark's perspective.
I think it's a shared perspective. I think it's something that's commonly held. Let's face it, when in the early days of imaging, people were engaged with photography as family memory keepers to a large extent. Obviously, there were a variety of different end user types. There were professional photographers, there were news photographers, there were sports photographers, there were portrait photographers, many different kinds. But the idea of capturing memories was a common thread throughout the user community. Since then, I think there has been a substantial growth in, first of all, capturing images and video for sharing, and it beyond just the family memory keeper or taking pictures of members of the immediate family.
Yeah.
And it hasn't shifted, but it's grown in the area of creating content. It's not just capturing a moment or capturing an event. which is, let's face it, a lot of what people would do with photography back in, for decades and decades. They would capture, Thanksgiving, they would capture, their children's activities for memories 50 years later. But instead, it was a growth in the idea of creating an image, creating content for a variety of different purposes. And certainly people have been creating content for over 100 years. Look at the cinema industry. So it's not new, but the ability of mainstream users to create spectacular content started to take place as the enabling technologies were available. And now people who are not, never went to photography school, don't have a visual arts degree, can create content that is amazing and has incredible entertainment potential.
And do it professionally.
Exactly. I mean, it can turn into an occupation.
I remember social media was, inviting someone over to look at 60 slides of your vacation. and it was usually like, slideshow, who wants to go see that? And now we force our slideshows across the entire world.
Force them.
And one of the One of the terms
Sure.
that I heard used by a good friend many years ago, well, more than 10 years ago, was the democratization of digital. And it's true that the technology itself and the accessibility of the technology itself has allowed a whole generation of users shift from just capturing memories to creating art. And that the impact of that on people, I think, is profound, and it has opened up an entire industry, if you think about it. Or let's not call it an industry; let's call it a way of life, an occupation, where people's aspirations to not just communicate but also to create merge together. And it becomes something that's very, very attractive and fulfilling.
In the last few minutes here, Jordan, why don't you find the last few questions you think that are the best ones for Mark to tackle?
So I touched earlier on the R1 because we're like, man, I remember that camera. I want to play with it again. I know we were on a press trip and you were just like, oh, yeah, I got one of those kicking around. And then the word got out, like Mark's got everything. So it just like, if there's something you're curious about, it might be there. So you have your personal collection. Like, what is the weirdest or like the most valuable thing for you there personally that you would not let go? Like if Sony shows up and they're like, give us all our stuff back, Mark, which one will you like hide in the attic so they can't track it down?
Well, just in case you're under a misconception, I do not have a collection in the attic.
Because that'd be irresponsible.
Was I all hyperbole?
Yeah, you're all hyperbole.
Part of retirement is returning that which is not yours. Just so you're aware of that. But I would say that the ones that are most significant are the ones that have the greatest sentimental value. My father was an avid photographer and an avid movie shooter. We didn't have video in those days. And when he passed away, I inherited some of his cameras. And one's a Leica 3A, and which I like to shoot. And the other is, oddly enough, it's because it's returning to popularity, is a Crown Graphic 4x5 view camera.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, let's face it, digital has its charms, but the process of film photography, in which I was raised, I first was a portrait photographer for high school yearbooks, as well as a sports photographer in high school, and that creative process it's I think it's entertaining, and I think people are returning to it because it's challenging. It doesn't provide the instant gratification that digital does, and I think that there are people who are very, very much attracted to the process itself, and I feel that, and I enjoy it myself.
Preach.
And I have in retirement time to pursue it.
Nice.
In a way in which I didn't before.
So even Mark Weir is returning to analog. That's fantastic.
Well, and I don't know how long it's been since you've chatted with Jaron, Mark, but Jaron is like deep into this right now. We were just traveling.
I got 10 rolls at the lab right now.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to the results. So you're not alone there.
All right.
One last thing is
let us introduce you to 4x5 photography when we get a chance.
Don't start. Don't get him started.
That's an episode.
We're working on slide film right now. I'm trying to discourage him from slide film use. Please do not get him started on 4x5. Oh boy.
Last thing, Jordan?
Last thing is we got to know you in some very cool shooting experiences and amazing locations. Like, what is the most incredible shooting experience or trip that working for Sony for all that time gave you the opportunity to be part of?
Well, for me, probably the fondest memories I have are, working with you all.
Specifically Jordan and I, right? Yes.
Well, no, all of you.
Take
members of the journalistic and influencer communities, I've always found exciting,
right.
and really entertaining because those trips were where we were introducing new products, new technologies, and looking forward to the feedback that we would get. That was the most important part because, let's face it, over the development of a product and a product life cycle, a lot of work and effort goes into not only developing it, but also communicating it, particularly if it's something new and different. Mm-hmm. Because when it's something that's really excitingly different, where we believe that the end user will become very inspired with what these products can do for them, that's very fulfilling. And I think I can speak for all manufacturers. They look forward to the time at which a model can be released. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
And the excitement of releasing a product together with the instantaneous feedback that is had when it gets put into your hands to use it for the first time, that's the culmination of a lot of effort and time. And it's, for me, I can say it was a very, very exciting time. And so if I was to think of an individual occasion, it would be the kinds of occasions at which the greatest breakthrough products were being introduced. And, you know what those are just as well as I do. But, particularly if you think about the development of mirrorless and the excitement around products like the first camera with a stacked sensor, the first camera with a global shutter sensor, and the performance that they realized, but more importantly, the opportunities that they offered for the end users, and how and the reaction of that and the excitement with that. I mean, that was probably the most exciting. The types of opportunities where we were in the field and we could really put these products to the test were also very, very exciting. I mean, there were a number of places that we would go to and a number of exciting opportunities that we had, and the great camaraderie as well. But the ones that I found were most exciting were the ones where the greatest game changers in capabilities were being introduced.
Yeah. Well, we always had a great time with you, Mark, and we always appreciate your support. And thanks for coming on the show to talk with us about your experience and share that with our viewers.
The innovation. Yeah, it's as well. There are less and less of them every day, but as my favorite band, I always used to say it was a long, strange trip, and it was very fulfilling. And we appreciate your interest.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Great to see you again.
Great to see you.
Again, big thanks to Mark Weir for joining us and giving us his insight into the camera industry from that perspective. What have you guys been up to? I mean, maybe we should address the fighter pilot in the room first, Jordan the Goose Drake.
Yeah, I do want to point out, with the Mark interview, I was waffling about am I just going to interview someone that I really respect, an important figure wearing this costume? And I will be frank, a coward. So I did not for that particular one. But I'm glad to be back with you gentlemen here, just with this show of confidence. And he didn't even ask about my mustache. I thought for sure he'd be like, what has happened?
I think he was just like, that's world just your look.
Yeah, I kind of want did you shave the sides already, or are you growing it back already?
So here's the thing. I took it off as a very last minute. My wife and I decided we were going as Goose and Maverick. Jaron, I'm going to send you a photo that you can slap on the screen here.
It's adorable.
Of the two of us going out. And just before we left, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to commit. And I ran downstairs and quickly shaved off the sides, just leaving the mustache here. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, this is my last moment as a married man. When I go back upstairs, she's going to be like, nope, that's it. Wash your hands of everything. And she was like, no, that actually works for you. And you mentioned it makes me look younger because all my gray is in the beard and the sides there. So I guess I look like a youthful, hot, young Jordan, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, we had a great time.
Or high school gym teacher Jordan, or
my dad.
Life insurance salesman Jordan, or
It's really easy for me to do a quick flip to do Jaron's dad. Yeah, on Halloween now. Just grab a couple old T-shirts and
you even have the same. I think we have the same nose, and the more that I'm looking at it, because I have my dad's nose, and it's very similar to my father. It's super. Yeah, he even smiled like that. Ugh, I don't like it.
So, are you going to keep it?
So here's the thing. First of all, I want your objective opinions. Out of 10, where would you rank this look for me?
I want to scrape it off right now.
Not objectively out of all humanity. I'm saying on the Jordan scale. I'm only going to peak so high, right? So in terms of keep it or lose it, 0 out of 10, where would you rank this look?
Chris is cringing at you right now. Chris, what are you going to give him?
Like a 4, like a 4.
I was gonna go as high as 6 because it doesn't look bad.
Wow.
If you like mustaches, it's a good mustache.
Yeah, you don't look like a bad person or a criminal or anything like that, or some sort of Chris. Dirty pornographer or anything. But 80s villain, yes.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking. I've already put in the legwork on this, so I'll send Jaron the link. I'm going to set up a Movember website because if I'm going to look like an idiot, I might as well do it for a good cause. So for the month of November, I think I will be mowing.
So that means in December, you'll have to actually shave it to restart, which I'm curious to see. I'd like to see baby-faced Jordan in December.
I think I'll just let this get super woolly and then start not shaving the edges and have really thin hair here with a huge bushy mustache, and that will be the 1 out of 10 look.
You know what? Maybe you got to grow it out more. Grow it out more. Yeah. That might be what it is. Maybe I need to see Prospector Jordan to really before I make my decision.
Let's see what I can do in a month.
AF.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I will not join you on that because my wife will leave me. She will leave me.
So will mine, but I'd take one for the team if you needed help joining. But Chris has to join too.
It wouldn't be, but no, I'm saying it wouldn't be you look younger. It'd be it's over.
She's out. No, I don't want to do that to either of you. So
she's see you in a month. You know what I mean? And to be honest, this month is important because what I've been up to is obviously the basement. It's almost done. It's very close to being done. And we're actually going to have a Japanese exchange student staying with us part-time. So that's going to be my November. And I definitely do not want to terrify him with a mustache. So, that'll be, that's what we're prepping for.
And he'll be like, "Oh, I need to go back to Japan now."
Yeah, he'll be like, "America's a scary place. North Americans are crazy, and I never want to come back."
80s villain.
Yeah, 80s villain. Yeah, exactly. So no, and then my middle son's going to go to just north of Sapporo next year to be with his family. So we're excited for that.
You built a fence too.
I built a fence with my neighbor. Yeah, I built a fence with my neighbor.
He sent me a picture of it yesterday, and it was nice.
It's almost done. It's almost done, but it's getting there. Yes.
Yes. I got two things. One, I'm wearing one of the shirts from the Nikon Museum. It is very comfortable. I'm very pleased with it. I also am using a different lighting setup than I have in previous weeks because I was shamed by a commenter that I didn't read live on the show, but I did read.
That's what inspires all good decisions.
Yeah, shame for not knowing how to light. It was more of a matter of just using the stuff that I had. But sure, I didn't know how to light. At any rate, LumeCube, who I had not really thought about for a really long time, reached out and asked me if I would like to test any of their products. And I would like to point out that this is not a cube, but it does indeed loom. I'm confused. It's a little rectangular
Lume
LED.
tent. What is it?
It's a flat panel LED.
Lume rectangle.
Lume oval.
Yeah, it's a Lume tangle. It has barn doors on it built in. It's got a battery built in. I have the light stand version. You can get a desk version too, and then it's controlled by this little remote for power and color and whatnot. I also have their little desk lamp. And Chris, if you've been enjoying the pictures I've been taking of my Gunpla builds lately, which they're pretty well lit, that's from the little desk lamp, which I actually really, really like. It is a very nice desk lamp.
Thanks for making Jaren happy, LumeCube.
So appreciate it. So here it is. I think these products are great. The light on me looks nice. So I'm pleased. If you're looking for something like that, check out LumeCube. That is not a sponsored segment, by the way. This is just products for us to test, and I wouldn't have said anything if I didn't like it. So.
Oh man, I just remembered, Jordan. I did rock a mustache for a while. Remember we did our wood nickels of the nice guys?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you had the Gosling stash, and you remained in a committed relationship. So maybe your fears aren't actually... So you're going to join me for Movember now. You just said it on mic, right?
No, I didn't.
That looks good on you.
I don't want to talk about it. It does not look good on me. It looks gross.
Okay. Well...
Yeah. Yeah. And I even did some Border Troutfitter episodes with that mustache. It's rough, dude.
And your audience was like, "One of us, mustache dude."
Yeah, it was bad. They probably thought it was just ironic.
Well, let's get on to tech support. We've got a bunch to get through. Let's start with a speak pipe from Bernard.
Hi, Chris, Jordan, and Jaren. As a tinkerer who works on computer repair and likes to take things apart, have you ever heard of or been involved in any communities or forums dedicated to modifying cameras, either through software or hardware? If so, what are some modifications you've encountered? Like, have you seen modified firmware to increase frame rates or addition of cooling to overheating cameras, stuff like that? Love the podcast, by the way. Keep it up. Thanks.
Thanks, Bernard. I don't know. From my perspective, not much. I mean, modifying cameras physically, it's what I've seen is largely relegated to, of course, sensor coverings. I do like some of the infrared photography that you can get out of it. I've never tried that, mostly because I don't really have a camera sitting around that I would send in. But if I do ever get one, that might be neat because there's some cool stuff you can get.
Yeah, I haven't done much in terms of physical hardware. I know we were tempted with the R5 when it first shipped to look at some of the jury-rigged overheating solutions available for that. So really it comes down more to software. And obviously the big two is I worked at the camera store when both Magic Lantern and the GH2 Driftwood hack came out. And in both cases, we were kind of a support system for those, even though it was completely unofficial. But the Canon hack unlocked a bunch of professional video tools, much better compression, and even raw video recording. And then with the GH2, we saw a huge bump in data rate with that made it essentially equivalent to a lot of professional cameras and a better video camera than the AF100, which was their kind of like consumer cinema camera at that point. And both of those were actually surprisingly stable. So I think it's because there was a huge groundswell of support from the community, so things got ironed out very quickly, where now I feel like the software that is included in the cameras is quite well developed.
Yeah.
So anybody doing that kind of stuff, it's a much smaller, more niche audience. So we don't, it might be a little more stable or a little less stable, things like that. So I haven't dipped my toe in it for a while.
If you're interested in just like seeing what other people are doing, I know there's one company that does a lot of really interesting stuff with cameras, and that's Kalari Vision. They do the sensor replacements, of course, but they also will do like other types of modifications to cameras, hardware, not software. So that's a neat place to go look and see what they're doing. I don't know if they've got a community or anything, but their blog is interesting.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah.
The next one is an email from Amaro. Hi, PetaPixel Papas. Amaro, the bat biologist here with a few questions about video. I mainly shoot photos of wildlife, but I've recently gotten into shooting short video clips as well, especially in slow motion. I'm still wrapping my head around how shutter speed works in video. When I'm shooting 120 FIPS, I set my shutter speed to 1/240 or at least 1/239.9 on the X-T5. But a lot of slow-mo clips are played back at normal speed for most of the videos and then transition to slow-mo when the interesting action happens. What do you do with your shutter speed in these cases? Do you just have to deal with having a lot of your final video at the, quote, wrong shutter speed? How big of a deal is it having the wrong shutter speed, especially when videos are, say, being viewed on Instagram or a phone screen? Also, any favorite Fujifilm film sims or tweaks to get pretty videos straight out of camera? Finally, speaking of making videos that will mostly be viewed on social media, I also enjoy making time lapses, especially of the night sky. I tend to shoot raw photos, edit them, export as DNGs or JPEGs, and import those into Premiere Pro or another editor as frames. When in the process should I be downsizing my images from 7700 by 5000 pixels to 4K or 1080p or whatever? Does it make a difference whether that happens in Lightroom or Premiere or during video rendering? Thanks, y'all. Love what you're doing. Sorry for the long email, Amaro. Tackle that first one first.
Okay, Jordan, we got quite a mission here.
Yeah.
All right. Let's
Afterburners to full, Jordan.
Yeah, so the shutter speed one is very difficult. So what the 180-degree shutter rule is most essential when you're shooting lower frame rates because you don't want jerky-looking video. I would say once you get to 60 frames per second and above, I'm much more willing to break those because that stutteriness, since the frames are closer together, isn't quite as prevalent with it. So the shutter speed I'll use when I get to high frame rates is dependent on what I'm looking to capture. If I'm shooting something that moves slower, like people, like Chris moving around and I want it more dramatic, I will still follow the 180-degree shutter rule, especially because on, say, the Panasonic bodies, I can just leave it at 180 and it'll do a nice job. But if I'm doing extreme slow-mo of very fast-moving things, water specifically comes to mind, then I'll actually use a faster shutter speed because I want those individual droplets of water to be extremely clear in it. So that's where I'm willing to break that rule a little bit. But once we go 60 frames and below, I generally always want to keep that, double your frame rate as your shutter speed rule. I find gives you a really nice look. The problem you'll run into is if you want to speed ramp. So like you said, have normal looking footage that suddenly transitions to slow motion. It's extremely difficult to do that properly. Now, with having things like electronic variable ND filters, you can pre-program, so those suddenly open up as you crank up your shutter speed, but that's in like high-end cinema cameras for the most part. So you'll see this all the time in movies, and I drive my wife crazy with this. We're watching a scene in a TV show or movie, and suddenly the shutter speed seems to get fast for absolutely no reason, and you're like, oh, they're about to speed ramp in this particular clip. So yeah, it's something even professional filmmakers, they're just like, look, we'll shoot it in slow-mo before or after we use that effect. The shutter speeds are going to be fast. It's going to look weird and people are going to have to deal with it unless you go to a very elaborate workaround for it. The last one in terms of time lapse, I will throw in there. I always follow the 180 degree shutter rule in time lapse. I know you didn't ask about it, but if I'm doing popping a picture every 4 seconds, I'll do 2-second exposures. I just find that gives you very nice, natural, organic looking time lapse without a lot of jerkiness in the footage. It's a great rule to try and follow if you have enough ND filter, which is why that RevoRing we talked about might be good for time lapse photographers. But in terms of when you do the conform to your final frame size, I do that in editing software. So I go into Lightroom or Capture One or whatever, export it as full-size JPEGs, build an image sequence with those, and then in post, if I want to, I have the option of digitally cropping or zooming within that frame. Where if I were to export, my files as 4K or 8K within Lightroom or Capture One, then I don't have that same flexibility in my editing software. And you might find out that you want it later. The only drawback, of course, is that's quite demanding to edit. So just make sure your computer's up to snuff. But I find that's the most flexible way to do it. Did it.
I agree.
I'm rewarding myself with bubbly.
All right.
Man.
The next one is a SpeakPipe, Jordan from Calgary.
Hey guys, it's Jordan Drake from Calgary, Alberta. I just want to say I absolutely love the show. And Jaron, buddy, every single week you keep saying, oh, we've got so many SpeakPipes. I don't know how we're ever going to get to all of them. But Jaron, you got to remember, you've got a really good podcast here. It's getting more popular all the time. That means more SpeakPipes are going to keep showing up, and you're probably never going to get to the end of them. So, buddy, I just think it would be really good for you to just relax every week, just pick a few of the best ones, and don't worry about getting to absolutely everyone. I mean, we're all enjoying the show, and I think we'll all understand as listeners. I'm rambling on and on. Again, I love the show. You guys are great, especially that video guy. I forget his name. And smart man.
Yeah, and you know what?
Guys.
I'm so happy that we took the time where we could have answered another SpeakPipe for somebody to listen to Jordan from Calgary, because I think that was really insightful.
I'm curious what the listeners will think about that smart, wise viewer. So
I think that was really insightful. Yeah, cool. Good use of time.
I loved the second I sent that SpeakPipe. I think it was like 10 seconds later.
Wait,
I get a text from Jaron, and he's like, Jaron's like, what are you doing?
That was you?
I remember, and Jordan was also like the week after. He's like, "Aren't you forgetting one?" I'm like, "No, Jordan, I'm not forgetting one because I put them in the order I received them." He's very committed to take. Yeah, he takes this order that they arrive very seriously, so much that even one of the hosts can't jack the format. So that's right.
Big ups to Jaron for that.
That was like a month ago too. So there you go.
Oh my god.
He didn't want me to say anything to Chris. I probably shouldn't have even put it in here so that Chris.
I was going to text you the other day, but I'm like, it's too late.
I mean, I read all the stuff. I saw it. Great.
By the way,
great use of time.
That was a test of, by the way, me being able to play those live on the show for them to hear. So I may do that going forward because that actually worked pretty well.
That was fun.
All right. Next up is an email from Tim Hughes. Hi, Triple P.
Whoa.
Hope you guys are all doing well. Triple P, yeah, I had to think about it. I'm interested in getting a new camera, not to take better photos, but to make it easier for me to get the types of photos I enjoy taking. My main camera is an OM1, and paired with the 300 f4 and a teleconverter, it's pretty good for chasing birds, except the autofocus is not quite as good as it could be, maybe. Birds sitting in a tree, no worries, but birds in flight, BILFs, can be a bit more challenging for it. I added BILFs, he didn't say that. I also use it when traveling, and the compromise in terms of noise, performance, and size is generally something I have been happy with. I also have a Pentax K1. There are literally dozens of us. I enjoy using it for landscapes and astrophotography. You know what's funny, before I keep reading? This is not the first guy who says that he uses a combination of an OM system camera and a Pentax. That seems to be a relatively common combo. I don't know where Jordan just went. Yeah. I just got a blank chair.
He likes to fight for the underdog. Jordan just had to make sure that the fuel mixture was good for his jet. He's getting ready to take off on another mission.
Anyway, continuing with the question on the K1, but it weighs the same as a compact hatchback, so I don't travel with it too much. When I am traveling, my favorite camera is the GR3X because 40 millimeters is the correct focal length, and I can fit it in a small bag with the OM1. I'm thinking about the A7C II, I believe is what he meant to type, as something that is quite compact, but with great autofocus and quite fast shooting. But then the reach isn't quite as good as the Micro Four Third cameras. So do I actually want an A7CR, there we go, so I can crop more and still have something I can print from a 300mm lens that could also probably replace the K1 for landscapes. So essentially, should he replace both of his cameras with a single camera? Does the OM1 Mark II improve the autofocus enough? By all accounts, probably not. Is there another camera I should consider? An APS-C camera? Is that the right compromise in terms of detail and resolution for reach with longer lenses? Thanks.
First off, kudos to you for wanting to use pretty much every single brand ever known. I think you should keep going and get a Nikon and a Canon as well. I do like the A7C series of cameras. And I guess the only issues I would say, they're very compact, which is great. With a slower 300mm kind of equivalent lens, then you are going to have a fairly small compact camera. But they don't balance that great with longer glass. It's doable, but it's not a great balance. I do like the idea of going to higher megapixel sensor for wildlife and having that cropping potential. But the caveat is having more megapixels is great in that regard, but you also have to make sure that they're all sharp, which means that as you go to higher megapixel sensors, it's more demanding to make sure that you're avoiding motion blur, that your autofocus is very accurate. Everything's within the depth of field you want, because if there are any issues like slight motion blur, 60 megapixels is going to reveal that, and you're just going to crop into that, and you're not going to see any sort of real benefit. But absolutely, if you can get good, sharp results in focus, having higher megapixels does give wildlife photographers a little bit more room to crop, and they're otherwise great cameras. I mean, other than the EVFs being pretty, entry level, the autofocus is great. They're reliable. They're nice. I don't think the OM1 Mark II improves the autofocus enough to necessarily justify it over what you have now. I'd probably wait and see what happens if they improve it further on. But yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Cool. The next one is in SpeakPipe from Kenneth.
Hi guys. Question regarding the Nikon system. I am considering purchasing either the Z6 III or the ZF. I mostly shoot street photography, some low-light family indoor events, and sometimes at my local CrossFit gym, I shoot some of their events. Strictly photography, very rarely I take any video. So would you consider going for the possibly higher dynamic range of the ZF or the Z6 III? Even when shooting the sports event at the CrossFit gym, I rarely find that I need anything more than 5-6 FIPS just to make Chris happy. And in such situations, would you consider the ZF over the Z6 III? Love the show. Thank you.
First off, I really appreciate that. That's 2 people now in this episode using FIPS. So let's keep it going. I'd go ZF. It's super sexy. I love the black and white option on the switch right there, nice and quick. You're going to get plenty of FIPS to cover the kind of street photography you want to do. And then having better dynamic range, why not? I do like it.
I personally don't think that the dynamic range hit on the Z6 III is that big a deal. It's
not that big a deal.
It's not. So if you prefer the handling of the Z6 III over the ZF, which I think is a very valid thing to consider, I don't see a problem going Z6 III and ignoring the video features of that camera entirely. You can,
but the ZF gives you the sexy body. I like the handling just fine.
Sure.
The Z6 III, you get street cred, and the Z6 III's main strengths are going to be that partially stacked sensor, which is giving you basically insanely fast shooting speeds and good rolling shutter, electronic shutter usage. And those are both things that you might use for street, but not very often.
Well, he says CrossFit
and certainly
gym
not in,
too. Like if they're doing action stuff in CrossFit, I think you'll find that right now you say you don't use more than 5 or 6 FIPS. If you were given the option to use more than 5 or 6 FIPS, then I think you'd take it.
But the ZF shoots more than 5 or 6 FIPS. So,
okay. the Z6 III shoots more than the ZF does.
Of course, especially when you break into electronic shutter mode, it's insane. I don't know.
So there's reason to select both. Jordan, what do you think?
So the one that jumped out to me when we did our recent ZF versus Z6 III comparison is I do really like having the autofocus joystick with the 3D tracking. I find that's a really nice combination, combined with the fact that the Z6 III has that much better viewfinder. I find for that kind of stuff, especially shooting like low light, I'm going to be on the EVF quite a bit. So that would steer me that way a little bit. And the big thing I keep hearing with dynamic range, people saying like, I don't see a dynamic range difference. It's only if you push the shadows. If you're pushing shadows constantly in post, then sure, be concerned about dynamic range. But if you find you're not doing that, then that means the current DR that you've got available is more than sufficient. So it's not even a factor.
Isn't it mainly also at the lower ISO end too?
Yeah, as soon as you get above 800, they hit parity again. So if you're in a dark CrossFit gym shooting at 1600, you've got no image quality difference. And obviously, I prefer the handling and EVF on the Z6 III.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you.
Wait. What kind of agenda is going on here?
I have a ZF in this house right now, and I don't have a Z6 III. So I can play both sides of this.
Oh my God. All right.
Last one is an email from Felix. Hey guys, this is Felix. I have some questions for you guys. First, I don't understand what's so special about Leica's triple resolution technology. Why having a lower resolution RAW file is better than using the full 60 megapixels and then resizing it to a lower resolution. Second, is using third-party batteries safe enough for cameras or lights? Do you guys use them too? Third, is it useless to put a mechanical shutter inside of a camera with a global shutter sensor? And one extra question just for fun. Do you believe we will ever see a camera that can capture 1 petapixel before we die? Thanks and have a great day. So let's do those in order. So what's special about Leica's triple resolution tech?
Well, nothing really. I mean, a lot of manufacturers offer lower resolution. A lot of manufacturers offer lower resolution RAW files on high megapixel sensors. You know, if you feel that you definitely don't need the extra megapixels and you want to save storage space and, you know, maybe speed up burst shooting and stuff in some cases. So that's what it is. And there's certainly use for that. I mean, some people want to have smaller files, but still have the raw malleability. So that's what they're doing there.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out when they initially introduced that, they said you've got lower resolution RAW for low light performance, which is very disingenuous because if you look at them, they would show them at 100% magnification, and absolutely the higher res had more noise. But if you looked at them at the same viewing size, they're exactly the same. So do it to save space. Don't do it for low light performance.
No, that's silly. Second, third-party batteries safe enough for cameras or lights. Yeah, I mean, yes, I'm sure there's some stories out there, and certainly there's reputable brands of third-party batteries that you can buy and stuff. But honestly, I've never really had any bad experiences. That being said, you know, certainly more for things like lighting. I mean, L-mount batteries, I don't care. It can be a cavalcade of genericness as far as I'm concerned. But when it comes to portable batteries, you absolutely want to make sure that you're getting something that has the power that you need, the power delivery that you need. When it comes to cameras, often third-party batteries, you're going to lose certain features and support. And so, I tend not to rely on that much anymore. It used to be a really big thing back in the DSLR days and early mirrorless. Now I think more and more people are sticking to original manufacturer batteries. And I think that's probably the safe choice as far as keeping your camera performance optimal.
Yeah, I think that definitely in camera, I try to avoid third party because they do tend to be a little bit smarter about detecting that and, like you said, disabling some features. If you're looking at video formats, I mean, you're going third party generally. And I can say we've seen a huge variety. I remember when Chris and I were at Brewster's one afternoon and there was a loud bang and an L-mount battery in my bag exploded that was still attached to a Atomos Ninja recorder. Could have started a fire. fire. No reason it couldn't have. So in those, I am very cautious. I don't leave them attached to anything when they're, in my basement or something like that. And I take them off the charger as soon as they're done.
But again, that could have been physical damage. That could have been cracked.
I'm not kind to my equipment, so that's a possibility. But I can say that's never happened to a first party where I was like, if that happened anywhere else, I could have burned a house down.
Now, on older cameras, just as a caveat, on older cameras, like if I bought something on KH or something used, and it's 5 years old or something, I would, especially if the batteries are hard to find, I'd get generic. Sure.
Yeah.
No problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a new third-party battery than an ancient first-party battery.
Yeah. 100%. Is it useless to put a mechanical shutter inside a camera with a global shutter sensor? Yeah. Kind of, sort of, pretty much. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, the sensor, what we saw with the A9 III is the DR, that penalty is going to come along with the sensor design anyways. So unless they figure out a way like Nikon put that patent in to like read out as a rolling shutter or a global shutter, and there's a DR advantage, then that might make sense. But with current technology, there's no reason for there to be one, except that it is super satisfying when your camera goes shukluki.
But again, even global shutter DR is still pretty decent, right? I mean, we are kind of getting to that point where it's not as big a consideration as it used to be for most people.
Last one is, I'm guessing the question about seeing a camera shoot a petapixel, meaning the sensor itself.
Before I die?
Is a petapixel, not like, because even now gigapixel cameras are typically stitching. So it's like,
right.
We're not even at a gigapixel yet.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. Certainly not for Jordan, because he's going to have an ejection seat accident here on his next mission. So
what?
Which is it's what? Don't worry about it. But
is that really a good or bad or middle way to die?
Oh,
I think it'd be pretty quick,
but it'd be horrible.
No, it'd be it's horrible for Meg Ryan. So just think about Meg Ryan, man.
It depends on the type of thing that would happen, because if he dies like at altitude, that's probably quick. But there's a multiple other ways to die on your way down that they tell you about when they're briefing you on how to survive an ejection. And there's a lot of them, and several of those are horrible. So
Jordan,
uncomfortable.
What's the best American air superiority fighter ever made? In your opinion, as an expert.
As an expert, it is the F16 I've heard before. No, that's an Aperture. F14?
F14 is also an Aperture.
Yeah, but it's not usually on the lens. Am I good? Am I good and smart? Did I do it?
The F-14 Tomcat's a great airplane, yes, and it is what they basically featured in Top Gun and Top Gun 2. But it's the F-15. The F-15 Eagle is actually the best, in my opinion. Anyways, we can argue about that later.
How about the game for DOS called F-15? So maybe I should have gone that way.
How about
the F-15 Strike Eagle is an amazing
A-10C Thunderbolt 2 Warthog? No.
Sure, but not as an air superiority fighter.
You're in the air, superior over the ground.
They're actually phasing that. They're phasing that plane out, and it's really sad. It's very sad. I love the A-10 Warthog. Yeah.
Finally, transitioning back to what this show's actually about.
That wasn't our feel-good story?
It was not. No, the feel-good story of the week is that Canon USA is now offering CPS membership to students for free.
Cool.
This adorable. Actually a good tier of CPS membership. It's one that you would typically have to pay for. Students get the 3 to 5 business day service turnaround time on DSLR or mirrorless cameras, as well as EF and RF lenses, 10% discount on repairs, complimentary Canon maintenance service on up to 2 items per membership term, on-site event support, exclusive purchase offers on up to 1 item per year, and access to the CPS mentorship hotline.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So the one thing I was wondering, if you're in like a journalism program, is that something Canon was already offering to schools that they're now extending to students' personal stuff? I'm wondering about that a little bit, if they would like rush a school's fleet of cameras. But I don't have the answer for that, and it only occurred to me 20 seconds ago, so I didn't research it.
I will say that
because I'm a spontaneous, fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy.
I will say that this is slightly better than Canon's silver tier, which is free. You don't get the repair discount with the silver tier. So that's nice. But neither the silver nor the student has equipment evaluation loans that requires the gold service. Gold, platinum, and cinema get that. But still, having any of this as included for nothing to a student, that's great. So that makes me feel like Canon is at least trying to do something more here, and that feels good.
Very nice. All right. Well, hey, everybody, we appreciate you sticking around on that somewhat long podcast, but
yeah, with that, we're going to call it.
We're going to call to Mark for coming on.
Yeah,
and the Top Gun instructor that graced us with his presence.
Yeah. Thanks to OM System and Clean My Mat for sponsoring this episode, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Zipper stuck. I was going to try and dramatically.
Please include that. Please.
Oh, I'm not stopping it. No, that's going in.